put in the plan. Just more money that they put in their hand. Just more money that they take out the bag. Stamp get kicked back through the tax. Taking little kids is an OCS trap. We don't need your education and elimination of our way of thinking. Assimilation to your racist system. Hey, OCS, hey, OCS, OCS. Leave them kids alone. Leave those kids alone. Alright, we tuning back in for another episode of NaNTV. We're gonna start this day off right. I like to start mine off with black coffee. But yeah, stay tuned because we're about to get into it today. Today we'll be talking about the crooked system that's built to steal your children, America. Pay attention because they coming for your kids. You either stand for something or you fall for anything. Stay tuned. NaNTV, baby.
The U.S. has a long and brutal legacy of attempting to eradicate Native Americans. For centuries, they colonized Native American lands and murdered their populations. They forced them west and pushed them into small, confined patches of land. But Native Americans resisted. A Board of Indian Commissioners report said, instead of dying out under the light and contact of civilization, the Indian population is steadily increasing. And that was an obstacle to total American expansion. So the U.S. found a new solution to absorb and assimilate them. It all started with an experiment and a man named Richard Henry Pratt.
He had in his charge some prisoners of war, and he taught these men how to speak English, how to read and write, and how to do labor. He dressed them in military uniforms and basically ran an assimilation experiment. And then he took his results to the federal government and said, they're capable of being civilized. So he was able to get this project funded.
In 1879, the government funded Pratt's project, the first ever off-reservation boarding school for Native American children. His motto was to kill the Indian and save the man. What started there at the Carlisle Indian Industrial School was nothing short of genocide, disguised as American education. Children were forcibly taken from reservations and placed into the school, hundreds, even thousands of miles away from their families. They were stripped of their traditional clothing, their hair was cut short. They were given new names and forbidden from speaking their native languages.
To take our children and to indoctrinate them into Western society, to take away their identity as indigenous peoples, their tribal identity. I think it's one of the most effective and insidious ways that the U.S. did do harm to indigenous peoples here, because it targeted our children, our most vulnerable. And they tried to make us ashamed for being Indian, and they tried to make us something other than Indian.
There are also accounts of mental, physical, and sexual abuse, of forced manual labor, neglect, starvation, and death.
My great-grandfather went to Carlisle, and nobody in my family ever talked about it. So if you Google Indian boarding schools, the majority of the pictures that you will see will be actually from Carlisle. Colonel Pratt created propaganda. He hired a photographer to create those before and after photos to show that his experiment was working. So it was, intentional propaganda.
Well, top of the morning to you, or evening, or whatever time this episode dropped. NaNTV is back in effect, baby. Yeah. Today, we're going to be talking about this crooked system. The system that's built to steal your children. So, I've been looking up some stuff online, and I found some pretty interesting things going on in the days and the times we living in. Mechanisms of disappropriate removal. Critics argue that the several systemic factors lead to the theft or unjust removal of children of color. Conflation of poverty with neglect. Many removals are based on neglect charges that are actually symptoms of poverty, such as inaccurate housing, food insecurity, or lack of child care. Implicit and explicit bias. That sounds good, don't it? Sounds right up my alley. Child welfare professionals may let personal biases impact decisions during reporting, investigations, and placement, often judging parents of color more harshly. Parents of color more harshly. Make sure that sticks. Surveillance and policing. Black and indigenous communities often face higher levels of state surveillance, leading to a higher rate of investigations. Over half of all black children will be subjected to an investigation by age 18. Pretty interesting, huh? Hidden foster care. This sounds great. Agencies sometimes pressure parents to voluntarily place children with relatives to avoid formal court oversight, which often deprives families of legal protections, financial support, and reunification services. They got some systematic shit about them, don't they? The new slave trade. That's what I call it. It's the new way to get money out of you, get child support out of you. It's the new slave trade. Only they toned it down a little bit, to make it fit their narrative. Check this out. Systemic mandates. Families are often forced to complete expensive or time-consuming services, as myself, to regain custody, which can be impossible for low-income parents to fulfill without material support. Disproportionate outcomes. Statistics from the U.S. Administration for Children and Families and advocacy groups highlight these disparities. Overrepresentation. Black children make up roughly 14% of the U.S. child population, but 22% of those are in foster care. Once in the system, the children of color remain in foster care longer, experience more placement moves, and are significantly less likely to reunite with their families than white children. Termination of rights. Black children are 2.4 times more likely than white children to have their parental rights permanently terminated. Historical context. This is where a person give their opinion. Advocates like Professor Dorothy Roberts notes that these practices are rooted in a history of state-sponsored family separation, including the separation of families during slavery and forced placement of indigenous children in boarding schools. Organizations such as Child Rights work to reform these policies by advocating for blind removals and prioritizing family preservation over separation. It's pretty good right there, huh? That's how we're going to start this day off. Welcome to NaNTV. Don't be a victim of the system. And then I've been keeping up with that trial that took place with them bringing that thing to that federal court. Here, I'm gonna tune into this, so y'all, we gonna watch this together. But look what the outcome was, and to be honest, I'm not surprised that the outcome was this. We live in a country that is designed for you never to win. Your whole life is spent never to win. Never to question why I gotta get up and go do that, or why I gotta go do that, why I gotta pay taxes, because it's all a design to keep you a victim of the system. All right, man, here we go, man. Let's see what the outcome of this big trial against Child Protective Services turned out. The most crookedest people on earth. the kidnappers, the baby takers. You know why they do that? Because it's big business. It's big money, baby. Yeah. All right. Here we go. What's the outcome? I wonder what it is. I'm excited. Maybe they won, huh?
Alleged Alaska foster children are at risk of harm because of systematic problems that violated federal laws, including the Americans with Disabilities Act and federal child welfare protections. They pointed to high caseloads for caseworkers and an inadequate hiring and training process. About 2/3 of the kids in out-of-home care in the state are Alaska Native. But Gleason wrote that the attorneys didn't prove that any of the foster youth represented were actually harmed.
Oh, wow.
Gleason also questioned the reliability of the evidence presented. Marcia Lowry is attorney and executive director of A Better Childhood, which brought the suit. She called the dismissal quite disappointing.
We did do a trial that involved a lot of evidence that I think was largely undisputed about how high the caseloads are in Alaska, about the lack of placement resources for children, about the failure to basically make attempts to remedy that situation.
She says a lot of children in Alaska are not getting benefits they're entitled to under federal law. Lowry says A Better Childhood is not sure yet of its next steps, but is considering an appeal.
We have seen dysfunctional child welfare systems really change and provide good services to kids, but we have seen that only as a result of litigation.
The Office of Children's Services declined an interview for the story.
I wonder
in a
why.
written statement, they said they're pleased with the court's decision,
I bet
and the
you
verdict
are.
is an opportunity for the office to continue advancing its work. This story was provided
Advancing
by
their
Alaska
kidnapping
Public Media's
agenda.
Rachel Cassandra. Last week, the U.S. Supreme Court spent 2 hours hearing a landmark case that could upend birthright citizenship. A 19th century ruling on the citizenship of tribal members was at the heart of the Trump administration's defense. KJZZ's Gabriel Pietrasio has this report.
This was the exchange during oral arguments when Justice Neil Gorsuch pressed Solicitor General John Sauer, who presented the government's case.
Yes. So if a tribal Indian, for example, gives up allegiance to...
Born today, birthright citizens.
I think so, on our test, if they were lawfully domiciled here.
Okay.
And then I'm not sure, I have to think that through, but that's my reaction.
I'll take the yes, that's all right.
In an 1884 majority decision, the justices ruled John Elk, a Winnebago man living in Omaha, was not a U.S. citizen, in spite of the 14th Amendment codifying birthright citizenship.
My mother was probably not a United States citizen when she was born in 1923 in Oklahoma.
Bob Miller, who is Eastern Shawnee and with ASU's Indian Legal Clinic, has been teaching this very precedent of Elk versus Wilkins for 3 decades now.
I disagree completely with the argument that that's analogous to undocumented immigrants and them having children here.
For National Native News, I'm Gabriel Pietrasio.
And I'm Jill Freitas.
Well, that's pretty interesting. They brought that lawsuit up against them, and guess what happened? The federal court found no basis to continue. Case dismissed. Because like I said on my last show, people bring these kind of cases every 10 years. The same wording, the same problems has happened in foster care with kids getting hurt or sexually abused. The same thing happens every 10 years. And don't be surprised by the result, because in another 10 years, they're going to bring another lawsuit and they're going to lose again. You know why? Because the system is broken. The system is broken all the way at the top, where all the top elite people get to do whatever they want to do, commit as many crimes as they can commit, sexually abuse women as much as they want, take people's children, shoot you in the streets. They don't give a damn about you, America. They never have. You're just a battery, like in the Matrix. You just put in your little charge, and they feed off of all of you, like a symbiont. Without you, they can't even survive. You pay all the bills, America, and this is what you're gonna let them do to you? All right, let's check out this next one I'm pulling up. This is about foster care crimes against children. All right, let's get into this. Foster care crimes against children refer to abuse, neglect, or exploitation that occurs while children are under the care and supervision of the state. Foster parents or residential facilities, while intended to be a safe haven, the foster care system sometimes fails to protect children who face a higher risk of victimization due to the instability, understaffing, and inadequate screening of caregivers. These are the types of abuses that are happening in foster care homes all across the country, America. This is what's happening to America's children. Sexual abuse. Studies indicate that foster children are at a significantly higher risk of sexual abuse compared to the general population, with some studies showing they are 4 times more likely to experience it. Perpetrators often include foster family members, peers, group home staff, or kinship caregivers. Physical abuse. This includes acts of causing physical harm, such as beating, burning, or choking, often resulting in severe injuries, including cases of death. Maltreatment involving the failure of foster parents or residential staff to provide basic needs such as food, shelter, and medical care. Yeah, when my son was in foster care, he wasn't provided no soap for a shower. Her pedophile teenage boy watching son is giving showers to the foster care kids. What else? What else they doing in there? Oh, you can't get no food because there's tape on the cabinet. You can't even open it without the tape alerting you. As soon as they make that noise, that bitch probably come in with a switch. Hey, check this out. Now that's the physical abuse. Now we're going to get into the other stuff. Here we go. Emotional and psychological abuse, verbal assaults, humiliation, intimidation, and isolation. Human trafficking. Children in foster care are frequently targeted by sex traffickers, with estimates suggesting up to 60% of child sex trafficking victims have histories in the child welfare system. Isn't that interesting? Substantial risks of harm. Often the most common reasons for indicated reports in foster and related relative homes indicating that the environment is unsafe. Substantial risks of harm. Perpetrators. In a non-related foster family home, perpetrators of abuse are most often the foster parents themselves, 56%, followed by birth parents at a 13%, and other children at a 10%. Prevalent study estimated that up to 40% of children in foster care have experienced some type of abuse while in the system. The system that you take kids away from their parents to say that it is safe. Oh, we're going to take them from a bad situation to an even worse situation. Ha! Telling y'all they kidnapping your kids, brainwashing them too. Higher risks. Children in group homes are particularly vulnerable, with studies suggesting they are significantly more likely to be abused than those in traditional foster homes. Long-term impact. Victims of foster care abuse often suffer from long-term trauma, including PTSD, depression, anxiety, and increased risk of drug abuse and future re-victimization. Whew. Long-term impacts right there. Systemic failures. We know about systemic. That's the topic of today's discussion. Screening deficiencies. Inadequate screening of foster parents and caregivers allow perpetrators to gain access to children. So their hiring practices are so lax that pedophiles, child molesters all get these jobs and go unnoticed because of the inadequate screening process. This is how incompetent their whole organization is. Systemic failures. Screening deficiencies. Oh, we did that one. I'm sure on the systemic today. Overloaded system. High rates of turnover. Inadequate training. And overwhelming caseloads for caseworkers limit the ability to properly monitor children in care. Lack of reporting. Many instances of abuse go unreported or are not recognized due to the complex needs of the children, who may be already exhibiting behavioral challenges. Wow. This is pretty bad, man. This is what's going on in America's foster homes. What y'all think, y'all? Is America great again? Is America safe again? You know? Are the kids okay? Has anybody checked on the children? You know? Anybody checked on the kids today? Is everybody doing their job? You know? Because, you know, a lot of this systemic stuff is, you know, I'm not to take away that they're not taking white children, because believe me, they taking white babies just as much as they taking any other babies. But I'm also showing you how easy it is for them to take babies of color, black, indigenous children, people that live in low poverty or believed to be lived in poverty, and feel like, oh, we can just take your kids and there's nothing you can do about it because we're the government. And we're going to be able to manipulate the courts, and we're going to be able to point you out to be a bad role model because you make rap videos that are fake. You stupid motherfucker. That's how dumb you are. But yeah, so this is what we're going to be talking about today. Then we talk about the privilege of having authority over other people. You know what I'm saying? To be able to tell someone, you either live like me or you don't get to live. You know what I'm saying? If you drink your coffee black and they drink their coffee with creamer, and they say, if you don't drink your coffee with creamer, you're a horrible person. You know what I'm saying? This is how America works. You make one mistake, or you do a mistake. You fix the mistake. They will still go back to that mistake you did. They don't care if you fixed it. It's all built to point the finger at you and never at themselves. That's the problem with America. We want to hold everybody else accountable, but ourselves. So yeah, that was my episode today on NaNTV, talking about, you know, the theft of America's children. It's very frequent in America right now. It's going on. Everybody worried about what's going on in the news. Don't worry, we're going to get to that subject here soon. We got Nan Politically Correct coming. We're going to get to all of this. You know, all this did was make me realize that people can paint a picture of you, and then they say, yeah, we got them. Well, now I'm going to paint a picture of you, because this is the last time. This is going to be the last time you ever destroy families in America again. Y'all stay tuned for my next episode coming soon. We're going to talk about the drug epidemic in America. We're going to talk about these politicians stealing money and raping kids. We got a lot of shit to talk about, America. It's out of control. What we going to do about it? We going to continue to be victims of the system? Or we going to have a voice? Our voices are the most powerfulest thing we got right now. And I'm going to use mine. Everybody stay tuned. NaNTV. You know what it is.
And it worked. The Carlisle model of education swept the country and led to the creation of over 350 boarding schools to assimilate Native American children.
On the one hand, we have the Navajo as we find him in the desert. Few of these boys and girls have ever seen a white man. Yet, through the agencies of the government, they are being rapidly brought from their state of comparative savagery and barbarism to one of civilization.
In 1900, there were about 20,000 Native American children in these schools. By 1925, that number more than tripled. Families that refused to send their kids to these schools faced consequences like incarceration at Alcatraz or the withholding of food rations. Some parents who did lose their children to these schools even camped outside to be close to them. Many students ran away. Some found ways to hold on to their languages and cultures. Others, though, could no longer communicate with family members. And some never returned home at all. By stripping the children of their Native American identities, the U.S. government had found a way to disconnect them from their lands. And that was part of the U.S. strategy. During the same era in which thousands of children were sent away to boarding schools, a number of U.S. policies infringed on their tribal lands back home. In less than 5 decades, 2/3 of Native American lands had been taken away.
The whole thing was purposeful. And the fact that it has been buried in the history books and not acknowledged is also intentional. And in fact, the same tactics were used in New Zealand, Australia, Canada. All of these countries have acknowledged, apologized, or reconciled in some way, except for the United States.
Over time, the brutality of boarding schools started to surface. And after a 1928 report detailed the horrific conditions at some schools, many began to close. In the 1960s, Indigenous activism rose alongside the civil rights movement. And by the 1970s, that activism forced more schools to shut down. The government handed over control of the remaining boarding schools to tribes to be run in partnership with the Bureau of Indian Affairs. But just as the boarding school era started fading, another assimilation project took shape: adoption. The main goal of this pilot project was to stimulate the adoption of American Indian children to primarily non-Indian adoptive homes. They claimed it was to promote the adoption of the forgotten child, but it was essentially a continuation of the boarding school assimilation tactics. And the strategy came with a financial advantage for the government too. Adoption was cheaper than running boarding schools. But first, adoption officials had to sell white America on the idea of adopting Native American children. Feature stories like this one in Good Housekeeping marketed them to white families. They were described as unwanted, and adoption gave them a chance at new lives. In the end, their media campaign worked. White families wanted Indian adoption. But the problem was, many of these children were not orphans that nobody wanted. They were kids often ripped apart from families that wanted to keep them.
You still will hear stories today of people, my age, older, saying, I remember as a child, the social worker was coming and people would hide their children.
On reservations, social workers used catch-all phrases like child neglect or unfit parenting as evidence for removal. But their criteria was often questionable. Some accounts describe children being taken away for living with too many family members in the same household.
An extended family is a big thing for Native people, and that means being judged for being in a house that's overcrowded. So it's always whiteness is the standard for success, and everything else is judged by that standard.
By the 1960s, about 1 in 4 Native children were living apart from their families. The official Indian Adoption Project placed 395 Native American children into mostly white homes, but it was just one of many in an era of Native American adoptions. Other state agencies and private religious organizations began increasingly making placements for Native American children too.
My mother giving me up was a white person telling her if she didn't, she would never see her other kids again.
In one of the documents I have, it's addressed to my biological father, Victor Fox, that he was trying to look us up to get a hold of us. But Hennepin County wrote, Daniel and Douglas are adapting very well in their new family. This was totally, it was a false statement.
When you're adopted, you know you're missing something. I think I've likened it to having like when someone has like a 500-piece puzzle and they have all the pieces to make this pretty picture except one.
My adoptive mother was not well, verbally, physically, and sexually, and spiritually abusive. So by the time I was 14, I started drinking. 15, drugs were added, and I became an addict to numb. I didn't realize I was numbing pain.
I tried suicide, tried slicing my wrist one time.
Children were taken and believed like I believed for a long time that there was something wrong with me versus something wrong with the system.
The Indian Adoption Project was considered a success by the people who set it in motion. Officials claimed, generally speaking, we believe the Indian people have accepted the adoption of their children by Caucasian families and have been pleased to learn the protection afforded these children. But the truth was unsettling.
These hearings on Indian children's welfare is now in session.
Well, I was pregnant with Bobby, and the welfare kept coming over there and asking me if I'd give him up for adoption.
Before he was even born?
Yeah.
They picked up my children and placed them in a foster home. And I think that they were abused in a foster home.
4 years after Native people organized in this Senate hearing, Congress passed the Indian Child Welfare Act, known as ICWA.
It gives tribes a place at the table in court.
States would be required to provide services to families to prevent removal of an Indian child. And in case removal was necessary, they would have to try to keep the child with extended family or another Native American family.
Without our relatives, we cease to exist. So with Native people, part of our wealth is in our family. It's in who we're connected to.
But the legacy of family separation in Native communities has been difficult to fully undo. Today, Native American children are 4 times more likely to be placed in foster care than white children, even when their families have similar presenting problems. In these cases, ICWA is often the best legal protection they have, and it's been under attack repeatedly.
A young girl ripped from her foster family because of the Indian Children Welfare Act.
White adoptive families intent on keeping Native American children have tried to do away with the act, and they're often backed by conservative organizations.
The Indian Child Welfare Act was dealt a blow earlier this month.
The subject of a lawsuit issued on Tuesday by the Goldwater Institute, arguing that preferences given to American Indian families to adopt Indian children is unconstitutional and discriminates based on race.
It's a way for these industries, these very powerful industries, to try to attack what Indian identity is.
Wanting to overturn ICWA is connected to everything about who we are as a nation. So if we don't have any protections for our families, and if we don't have protections for our treaties, then we have no more Indians.
We've been under attack, we're gonna continue to be under attack. And we have to just keep fighting.
It's in our DNA to survive.
We are nations that pre-exist European contact, and we are still here.